legend signified no official time. I was captivated by the idea of places that had resisted being shackled by measures of time, no minutes or hours, wholly exempt from the tyranny of a schedule. Was time there frozen like the cardinal on the branch, or simply flowing, unmetered and unfettered, according to a wilder natural rhythm? Years later, when, through coincidence or predestination, I ended up doing fieldwork for my PhD in geology on Svalbard, I discovered that in some ways it was indeed a place beyond or outside time. The Ice Age had not yet loosened its grip. Relics of human history from disparate eras, whale bones discarded by 17th century blubber renderers, graves of Russian hunters from the reign of Catherine the Great, the torn fuselage of a Luftwaffe bomber, lay strewn across great barren swaths of tundra, as if in a poorly curated exhibition. I also learned that Svalbard's no official time designation was actually due to a petty, long-running argument between the Russians and Norwegians about whether to observe Moscow or Oslo time there. But on that long-ago snowy day, liberated temporarily from quotidian routines, on the cusp of adulthood, yet still snug in my parents' house, I had glimpsed the possibility that there were pockets where time remained undefined, amorphous, where one might even travel between past and present with equal freedom. With a dim premonition of the changes and losses that lay ahead, I wished that that perfect day could be my permanent home, from which I might venture, but always return to find everything unchanged. This was the start of a complicated relationship with time. I first traveled to Svalbard as a new graduate student, more specifically as a seasick passenger aboard a Norwegian Polar Institute research ship in the summer of 1984. Our field season could not begin until early July, when the sea ice had broken up enough for safe navigation. 3 long days after leaving mainland Norway, we at last reached the southwest coast of the island of Spitsbergen, the area that would be the focus of my doctoral work on the tectonic history of the mountain range there, the northernmost extension of the Appalachian Caledonian chain. In my miserable state of mal de mer, I was actually happy that the waves were too high that day for our small group to be carried to land by rubber boat, because it meant we'd have the luxury of a much quicker, drier trip by helicopter. We flew from the top deck of the pitching ship, with all our gear and food slung like a bag of onions in a net under the helicopter, and hanging perilously over the heaving seas. As we approached land, I remember searching the ground for some object to provide a sense of scale, but the boulders, streams, and patches of mossy tundra were of indeterminate size. Finally, I saw what looked like a weather-beaten wooden fruit crate. It turned out to be the hut we would live in for the next 2 months. Once the helicopter had left and the ship had vanished over the horizon, our camp became detached from late 20th century. The hut, or hytta, which was actually quite snug, had been built from driftwood by resourceful hunters in the early 1900s. We carried World War II vintage bolt-action Mausers as protection against polar bears. We had no way to communicate with the world apart from a prearranged nightly radio check-in with the ship, which would slowly circumnavigate the archipelago, taking oceanographic measurements over the course of the summer. We heard no news about current affairs. For years after that summer and the field seasons that followed, I would discover embarrassing lacunae in my knowledge of world events that had happened between July and September. What? When did Richard Burton die? On Svalbard, my perception of time becomes unmoored from the normal measures. It is partly the 24-hour summer daylight, not to say actual sunshine, the weather can be quite awful, which provides no cue for sleep. But it is also the single-minded focus on the natural history of an austere world that has so little memory of humans. Just as the size of objects is difficult to judge on the tundra, the temporal space between past events becomes hard to discern. The few human-made artifacts one finds, a tangled fishing net, a decaying weather balloon, seem older and shabbier than the ancient mountains, which are robust and vital. Lost in my thoughts on the long walks back to camp each day, my mind washed clean by the sound of wind and waves, I have sometimes felt as if I stood